very warm welcome to this Friday morning. In the midst of everything that is happening in COVID, we wanted to take an hour out to see what the impact is presently and what it might be in the future on the participation and the engagement of sport across our third level sector. We are delighted to be joined this morning by Michelle Tanner, who is Head of Sport in Trinity College in Dublin, and to get a perspective from the north of Ireland, we are joined by Nigel Dobson, who fulfills the same role across Ulster University and the different campuses, ranging from the spectacular new campus in Belfast over into the, well, a week ago, it was the ultimate hotspot of the campus over in Derry, but now we are plenty of hotspots. So we've joined you, unfortunately. We've got plenty to talk about, and we do want this to be an engaging session. So we will have the opportunity over the last 15, 20 minutes to actually open up to you in the room to ask questions. If you want, we can actually invite you in so that we can see and hear you, or we will be in a position to, to take questions through the Q&A button. And a very warm welcome to Catherine Mahoney from Student Sport Ireland, who has joined us right in the nick of time. So a warm welcome to you, Catherine. We will take a couple of minutes. First of all, I want to share with you the results of the short survey, which I sent out to many of you who had registered earlier on this week, and the results came in over Wednesday and Thursday. I'll just pull it up there now so that the screen will change slightly and will disappear over into the corner. The results were taken, and it was a very simple questionnaire asking two questions. One, as to your level of confidence in whether sport would be held in a meaningful fashion over the course of 2021. And the second, as to how sport was featuring as part of the wider conversation across education, in terms of making sure that everybody was safe, and in terms of making sure that everybody was participating in college life to the full of their extent. Mm-hmm. So the two questions came up, and just bear with me 1 second now. The first of them was our confidence in whether a meaningful campaign would take place. And it was ranked out of 100. So the overall level of confidence was coming in at 45%. Bear in mind, this was on Wednesday, Thursday, when Northern Ireland was preparing to go into its higher level of lockdown amidst surging numbers of cases, and where in the Republic of Ireland, there was already much discussion about extended midterm breaks and all of the, the changes that might have been coming in. So, to be confident was difficult, and it has obviously taken a knock. Students that look forward to participating in sport as a really integral part of their college life will be, no doubt, a little bit disconcerted to see that we are less than 50% confident that there will be a meaningful campaign, but also looking at the differences. And there was four groups, really core groups within the cohort of you in the room that answered the questions. And within the university sector, that confidence was higher, coming in at an average of 51%. That extended to beyond 90% in terms of some of the answers that were coming in. The Institute of Technology, again, a strong representation in the room today from you, less confident. And we might just explore some of the reasons why that might have been, with the sport bodies and the sponsors, both of whom have got a hugely important role to play, from outside of the room, so to speak, or outside of the college life itself. Both of those falling some way in the middle. Looking at the second question then, about how well sport is being considered, and this is an area that we'll touch on now in the conversation coming up. Again, the degree of comfort and confidence was less, it was in terms of whether it would come full circle. So I guess that the sort of the complex issues that surround getting a university and an education institution back up to speed and back up and running, while at the same time keeping everybody safe, is such that sport can only ever be one part of the equation. And the flip on this one was that the universities felt that it was perhaps taking less of an important role in the overall conversation. And the sponsors, perhaps, looking at it from the outside in a slightly different perspective, felt that it was a little bit more important, maybe in the context of the way that they were looking at their relationship and partnerships with the sporting bodies out there as well. So I thought that it was interesting. Thank you very much for for sharing your thoughts and views on that. And we may come back to that again over the next couple of weeks as things develop and change. Now, to bring us back into the conversation, we are, as I say, joined by Nigel Dobson from Ulster University, Michelle Tanner from Trinity College Dublin, and Catherine Mahoney representing Student Sport Ireland. And the conversation, I guess, will take up around about 25, 30 minutes. And then I do want to open it up to the room. So please feel free to either use the Q&A button down at the bottom or the chat facility if you want to ask a question, or indeed put your hand up if you have that facility on your device. And we will try and get to as broad a range of the conversation as possible. Just to kick things off then, I guess if I can come to you first, Michelle, lovely background there, reminding us of what college life can be about and should be about. The level of confidence coming in at less than 50%, is that overly cautious? Or do you feel is that realistic as to where we are now at the moment? Because events like the Sigerson, the Fitzgibbon, the Collingwood, all of the colours matches across the sports are such a huge and integral part that people remember deep into their various stages of life. If we can't get them played this year, that would be a huge blow. Where do you think that we sit at the moment?
Wow. Yeah, I think we're already halfway there, aren't we, in terms of believing that it won't happen and then hoping that it will happen. So I think it's very difficult to say at this stage whether those competitions that we hold very dearly to the whole third level sport environment, whether they'll actually happen or not. I'd like to think, I do take a positive approach with a lot of this, and I do think that there are a lot of opportunities for us. It may look very different. We may have to do those competitions very differently. But I do think that we can probably run some competitions at some stage, and we have to be ready for that. So I think it's important that we keep our clubs and our teams as active as possible within the restrictions. So that we're ready to respond and that we're able to, I guess, proactively get involved in some of those competitions. I think most people accept that it's going to be very different, but I do think there's an opportunity there to make sure that something happens.
And on campus at the moment, it is very strictly controlled in terms of access to, the city centre campus in Trinity. I know that the GAA moved quite swiftly towards, shutting down any training and use of facilities and things like that. But other sports may have been slightly different. Is there a general movement within sports? You're obviously in a position of trying to keep as many facilities open as you can, but are sports providing you with the right information and the right guidance in terms of what they want from their own student populations?
Yeah, I think, we've got ourselves we've been doing return to sport plans and phased resumption plans from the start, and all over the summer period right through to now into the academic year. And, Trinity's no different than our other institutions. We've all been trying to figure out what's the best way forward. I think if anything, a lot of the governing bodies and associations have actually got themselves in a good position that they're able to respond very quickly to any changes in the restrictions. and making it clear to everybody whether it's right or wrong, making it very clear that what the plans are for that sport. So, I mean, you referenced there the GAA, for example. They announced that all third level training and matches should be postponed for the next few weeks. And obviously we're very concerned, that what does that mean to our students who are participating in the GAA sports? So we're still encouraging our students to be active. So to still get together in groups of 15, non-contact training, fitness training or otherwise, to keep themselves active and moving. I think that's really, really important. And, the information that's coming out from the governing bodies and also the other agencies like Ireland Active, because we run our facilities as well. So we have to adapt our facilities as well as give guidelines to our clubs. A lot of those agencies have come out with really good instructions and clarity, and very quickly as well. So a lot of information is coming at the teams, but we've developed the templates, we've developed the plans, and it's just a matter of being able to adapt and adjust to them, and to create, I guess, the environment in which our students can still maintain activity safely, rather than completely stopping, which I think would be very detrimental for all sorts of reasons. So I think it is good at the moment that we've got good communications across the board from various bodies and organisations.
And we'll come back on a number of those points about the importance of sport. Nigel, if I can come to you, you're in a position within Northern Ireland in terms of the various different campuses from Magee to Belfast and all points in between, where you're operating under the UK government restrictions, filtered with the Stormont Assembly restrictions, filtered by a number of sporting bodies that are operating in an island of Ireland capacity. That sounds like a challenge.
I think challenge is a good descriptor, Rob. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And I feel for some of the sports themselves, because obviously we're trying to work quite closely and collaboratively with a number of our sporting partners. And it's just like everybody, really, what there's one or two lines of guidance actually mean when you get into the detail. And I think that's been particularly difficult. I think, like many of our colleagues, we've worked through the return to play, as Michelle said, for quite some time. We have things up and operating across a multitude of our campuses, and there's different facilities, different sports. But it is challenging when a new set of regulations come out, and it's just trying to find that point of what's your point of reference because of the complexity. So we're fairly lucky in terms that we have the Sports Institute Northern Ireland in our facilities here at Jordanstown, and their director is very much pushing and informing Stormont's decisions through Department of Communities in terms of what it means in the return phases that are put out. So that's a great contact for us to have, and just means that we can have some sort of a little bit of norm in terms of what we're doing. But it is, as I say, complex. We're still waiting. Still issues, obviously, in terms of who can and can't access our facilities. And we've got to about 6 o'clock this evening to try and work that out. And a number of calls that we had yesterday, really asking us for clarity. And so we have to push you back to your governing body to look at the regulations. The Northern Ireland Sports Forum, I must say, has been wonderful in terms of helping us navigate as well. But it's difficult. We've been on calls with British universities this week as well, looking at how they're dealing with some of these scenarios. And as you might or might not know, they've had exemption for in their rule of 6 for indoor sport. So we must be asking them also, is there a way that we can work with them and maybe lobby Sport Northern Ireland and others to look at what we can do in a safe setting, perhaps for indoor sport, when you consider things like maybe badminton or tennis or sports like that aren't necessarily contact. So yeah, we're working through. Patient, going a bit grey. Like all of us, but yeah, we'll stick at it.
Well done, and thanks for taking the time out when you've got a hard deadline of 6 o'clock. But I think in this world, hard deadlines become very soft and fluid deadlines at an alarmingly fast rate. Catherine, if I can bring you in, you're very welcome. I feel almost hard in terms of asking you to represent the sort of the views of whatever we have, 150,000 third level students across the country. That's a lot of weight to put on one pair of shoulders, but no better, woman. How do you feel that the sporting population within the third level student body are feeling at the moment?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Rob. So I've given this a good deal of thought, and I find that there's a bit of a disconnect between the policy for participation in sport at the national level and the demand for sport really at the student level, but really at the larger level of the public, because it seems to me as though there are great allowances being made for elite sport, but of course it's only a tiny percentage of athletes, and perhaps that percentage is larger among students, being of the sort of age where elite competition takes place. But I think, I'm a statistician myself, and I think that it's obvious when you look at the participation statistics that the recreational sport is by far the discipline, if you will, in which there's the highest demand. And I think that it's the one that is most overlooked, and the one where, at least in UCD and in SSI, many of our discussions have been taking place about sport in which the participants have no interest, no desire for competition. So while obviously it's tremendously important for morale to keep competition at least on the table, I find that the focus, which serves the largest number of people, which is recreational sport, there's little guidance. And in my own sport, which is cycling, we've had a tremendous uptick in demand for recreational and leisure participation in our sport. And I think where students are concerned, the vast majority of us are participating for social reasons and for fitness rather than for elite competition.
I've been fortunate. I've been around on a couple of the campuses around Dublin over the course of the summer and the last few months, and very noticeable how quiet they are. And yet I was up in UCD just last week in the evening, and the five-a-side football facilities over there beside the bowl were open and jammed with people who were participating and playing. So I guess from the college's point of view, they make the facilities available. Now, maybe they weren't all students. I know that you can, go in and rent the place, but it did look as though it was very active. Now, I know that that's not the same on many campuses, and obviously the challenge there is how, as a facility manager, you can actually make things safe. If you're running and jogging and cycling, less so swimming, albeit the sea is open. The facilities are nature, so it's easier to actually do that. But in terms of the clubs and the societies, the whole of college life is kind of on pause at the moment. And if that is not to change materially over the course of the next couple of months, how much of an impact do you think that's going to have on people's experience of college life, but also, more importantly, on their own well-being and their own sense of self?
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? I find myself, so I'm a postgraduate student, and I found that my involvement in sport in UCD has made all the difference in helping to integrate. And it's probably obvious by now from the way that I speak that I'm not Irish. I'm an international student, and so doubly I've been able to find community in that way. And for other international students, for postgraduate students, for first year students in particular, those are the students for whom I feel the most sympathy. It's a tremendous loss. and I don't think that there's any way to get around that. And in UCD, we've just been speaking this week about increasing the number of either virtual events or distanced events for people who aren't necessarily wouldn't consider themselves athletes, but to get them involved in sports, because it is traditionally such a large part of the university experience. And I can only imagine that there are students who have been involved in sport who really grieve the loss of it, but also students who, as I said, may not consider themselves athletes, but would become involved in sport in university and have, perhaps without even knowing it, lost that connection to their fellow students and to the institution.
I think it is important in this context and in the overall context that sport should always be suffixed with "and physical activity." Those three words that are very important to actually put on, because you're right, we do tend to focus on the elite end of sport, and government has aided and abetted that by carving out specific exemptions. They are important in terms of the well-being and the morale of the nation as a whole, a debate which is going to be held with gusto over the coming days and weeks in relation to the All-Ireland Championships and the continuation of rugby and soccer fixtures. But the physical activity side of it is hugely important. Now, a lot of the sporting bodies, including many of those in the room, have moved to the virtual world and have created specific virtual programs. This morning, we spoke to Anya O'Gorman about the Aviva Soccer Sister, that at the younger end of the scale, bringing girls in, giving them skills online at 10 o'clock every morning and encouraging them to share. Is that something which, as colleges, that you have been assisting sports or assisting clubs in terms of helping out, or even doing it yourselves from the university perspective? If I can come to you first, Michelle.
Yeah, I think, Rob, yes, I agree with Catherine in lots of ways, but also I think it's important to note, and the people listening here today, that a lot of the institutions are very focused on physical activity and participation, and put as much effort into that end of the programming and activities as they do to supporting performance athletes. And, I think it's important that we do note that we will and do work with a lot of our partners and NGBs to ensure that we create that pathway to participation, because quite a few students will take up a sport for the first time ever in university environment where they didn't have the opportunity in their hometown or their school. We've over 50 sports clubs in Trinity, and it's not dissimilar around the country. There's lots of opportunities to get involved in things that they never really knew or were aware of. So I think physical activity is obviously very important at the moment, and I think there are lots of opportunities to engage, and we can facilitate that engagement with the national governing bodies and other agencies. So the student body is very interested and wants to be involved. We have, at the moment, we ran all our virtual club recruitment sessions, all the club sessions that were run virtually last week and the week before. We've had about, I think, 1,500 to nearly just under 2,000 students join a club in the virtual environment. I mean, it's incredible, really. There is interest. Students want to be engaged. They want to connect with others. And I think in lots of ways, we have many opportunities to provide for that, even in this current environment. And I also think we have a responsibility to do it too. I'm not sure that answers your question specifically, but I hope that it gives sheds some light on what we're trying to do within the third level sector.
Well, I think 1,500 signing up for a club in a virtual sense it certainly does. It answers the question in a positive way. There is a saying about old dogs and new tricks. There is also the prospect that maybe the youth population as such, who've been getting a pretty hard time of it from older, grayer, generally men, not like me, but perhaps a little bit resembling, that maybe they're better adapted. Maybe they are willing to actually throw themselves into a virtual world, and it's a different experience than some of us had in college, but it's the experience that's available at the moment. So I think you're absolutely right that it's hugely important to actually focus on that and not to give up on it almost as being just not quite good enough, that maybe it is good enough, and maybe it is as good as we can get at the moment. What's your experience been like up in Ulster, Nigel?
Yeah, it's interesting. The timing for us, you know, what's not great in terms of aspects of developing student sport and that wider participation base, you know, our ability not to be able to engage with students face to face, to offer them the opportunities is normally doing Freshers Fair, and that week is you know, it's been difficult. But the virtual take-up and some of the work I think that Student Sport Ireland did actually during lockdown in terms of the competitions, the virtual competitions that were set up between the different colleges, and you could vote. And I think that sort of gave a sense of engagement, a sense of belonging. And I think that's the really sort of important thing. Say we on one hand at the university, we've taken a lot of positives out of just having a bit of time to think and a bit of time to actually work through our future developments and future strategy for sport. We've got a brand new building and a decant of the students from Jordanstown to Belfast next year. And in very many ways, the university is describing that as a new chapter. So actually we, and Michelle knows because we've been down to Trinity a few times looking how they're operating, and we're going to try to transform the way that we operate to take these opportunities into case. And our sort of working title really at the moment in terms of developing a new strategy is about more of us being more active more often. And that's to try to engage more widely with a broader university, our broader university community, and to try to influence the development of our future estate strategy. We did quite a bit of work just before lockdown, which was really, really good in terms of putting new walking paths around our Coleraine campus, allowing, for once, which had always been a problem, allowing dog walkers to come onto campus and sort of encouraging that community engagement, as well as we say, you know, making sure that our virtual channels are up and running. So in terms of trying to consult with the rest of the university, we think it's a good time. There's a lot of strategies that any university has, and we're trying to align a lot of these strategies at the moment to say, how can we put first and foremost the well-being of our students, staff and our community at the front and central of our new strategy in the way that we operate. And that's really, really good. We actually have pulled some of this together and meeting the Vice-Chancellor on Tuesday, who's a new Vice-Chancellor, to put this case forward. And, you know, in some ways, it's not a good time to ask for financial resources because we're ambitious and want to do things, but it's a good time to offer a new Vice-Chancellor, we feel, an opportunity to take these engagement platforms, the well-being, the health, and work with well-being teams within the university forward to try to have a collective approach. So it's not just, which has been possibly the case in the past, it's not just the sport team and the student union, the sports union advocating for active lifestyles, active aging, even for some of our staff, etc., active programs. It's the collective of the university buying into this. And I think we're going to try to take that opportunity as much as we can in the next few weeks.
It sounds positive. We may have landed with the two of you at the upper end of the optimism scale. There's a note there from Paul Lee referencing UL, where the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Student Engagement, I'll just read this out, emailed all students last week to say that all social and club activities on campus are cancelled until further notice. Cancelled is one of those words which has become weighted with more significance than it had before. The variance between postponed, abandoned, cancelled, we're reading an awful lot more into those words now, but that's a pretty heavy shutter coming down on UL. Catherine, in terms of Student Sport Ireland and the sort of the overall, the organisational context, are you getting that sense that there is a very broad spectrum in terms of the facilities that students are able to engage with?
I think so. I must admit, I am not sure that I can speak necessarily to facilities as a pillar of the provision of sport in university. That would be, as the student rep, a little bit outside my area of expertise. But it's true that there are vastly different organizational structures in terms of what's available to students. And there's I think that that's an unavoidable reality, unfortunately. I would echo some of the things that Michelle and Nigel were saying, though, that I would place myself firmly in that optimists camp. But perhaps that's as a result of sports in my own institution, and seeing from other institutions in the context of FSI what can be provided. And I find myself that as a student committee member of a sports club, the impetus for us to organize our processes and streamline our onboarding procedures for new members and our safety provisions, which have always been rigid, or rigid is not the right word, but which have always been to a high standard, but now have to be, really exceptionally high standard. I find that those things will carry on into the future as quite positive fallout from what's quite I'm sure to some people, a disappointing year. But in terms of the variability of the offering, as I said, I'm not sure that I can necessarily speak to the diversity of the situation.
No, that's okay. Well, we have plenty in the room who are making those views known as well, and thanks to Paul for raising that. One interesting point, and we're starting to have some questions coming in now as well. We'll come to that in a few moments. But if you want to make a point, to raise a question, please do so using the Q&A button down there. Paul makes reference to the United States, and I was speaking last night to a couple of colleagues who are working in the US. College environment across a number of the different states. And the question that I really wanted to ask them was in relation to sporting sponsorships, scholarships. And we have a large number of Irish students that go over each year and that get their accommodation and an education paid for in relation to playing for sport. In the United States, though, it's a pretty hard, fast rule that if you're not competing in sport, and we don't really have a great interest in having you here on college. And in a number of cases, there are scholarships already being put on notice that they won't be continuing. We've built up an area across the third level, environment here, whereby we are not giving, $100,000 scholarships, but we are providing funding towards some expenses and providing student services to student sporting stars to actually sort of get them to come into colleges. What's the situation like with the scholarship programs now when sport is on pause or at varying different degrees of engagement? Nigel, how is this up in Ulster? Because I was up at your graduation ceremony last year. Brilliant occasion, seeing all of these students thanking the university for everything that you've done for them as well. But what is the situation with them now as we go through the year? Will there be payments made? Is it something that is under review?
No, we're very much sticking to our guns in the program. We want the program to continue. We've done a lot of work actually over the summer to develop a platform for both our scholared athletes, and we have a talented athlete scheme that encourages discounted points to those athletes at a certain level to come and gain entry to the university. So it's actually been quite good. Our whole sport development team, which, as you know, Rob, is in partnership with the governing bodies, they've been developing a SharePoint platform to actually share some of the resources. So that's a brilliant piece of work I think our guys have done this summer, really taking us on. And we actually want to enhance what we're doing really in terms of the scholarship program. You might remember, Rob, last year when we had our scholars up and we asked them to say a few words to some of our graduates. One of the things I don't think we do enough on is actually getting them to express themselves and to be confident as leaders and public speakers. So we're working with a company that we met, and it's all virtual, to try and just encourage the athletes to have a bit more confidence to talk about themselves, to talk about their ambitions. And so that's a program we're going to be delivering virtually in the next few weeks. And then probably look at our support services in terms of strength and conditioning and nutrition actually being online with integrated plans. So we don't necessarily always give money to the scholars. There are some pockets of money, but we defer the fees or we waive the fees. So we're just still going to continue that, and hopefully, we want to work with the governing bodies to make sure that we celebrate, as we normally do, the success of those scholarships and the potential that these athletes have. Because, like many of us, many of these athletes are still trying to get to World Championships next year if they happen, Commonwealth Games in Birmingham 2022. So we feel we have a duty on them. And also, we don't let these programs fall away. They've been established over a number of years. The strong programs, they have sponsorships behind them, alumni engagements. We want to celebrate that we are still acting and we're still pushing forward with our ambition on them.
Okay, and it's those, it is that, for want of a better phrase, those elite sports stars who actually provide role modeling for the rest of the participants from across the student body as well. I know that, even sort of moving away from the room that day back in it was December, I think it was, that, that there were lots of other students who were on the way to gyms and who had their gear bags and their bottles of water and that. And it's all just part of the overall context. In Trinity, I know that, there's a strong program, multi-sport and very good gender equality. I was always impressed about Michelle. How is your program looking and coming together now in the current climate?
Very similar to Nigel, we are still running our program, and albeit it's slightly less numbers involved because some of our academy athletes associated with specific sport and funding hasn't actually been available. So we're looking at about, I think I forget the exact figures, but it's in just under 40 athletes this year that we expect to have on our program. We would normally have up to about 70, so it's slightly lower than normal. But it's really impacted, as I said, the lower numbers are impacted because of funding not being available. But we are, within our own resources, keeping those supports and programs running for those athletes. I think it's really important. These athletes are on a journey through their performance, through their sport, but also on a journey through the university. And I don't think that should be paused because they're still having to complete their studies in a different environment. They're still having to train in a different environment. And we don't want them to lose those supports. It's very, very important. So albeit we've got less resources available to do that, we're still maintaining a core level of support and services to those athletes. I think it's really important at this moment in time. Because some of these athletes, because they're high performers as well, we have to remember they're very committed and very dedicated and focused, and need structure in their day. And I think if that structure or, all the uncertainty that we're experiencing at the moment creates a very difficult environment for these athletes. And I think if anything, we do need to ensure that they have some structure and they have some support on that journey, because they could easily derail. And I don't want to get too negative about it, but there's negative impact on their well-being. We don't want them to drop out of their sport because of how they're feeling. So I think it's really important that we support them even more now as best we can to stay engaged and connected with their activities and their academic studies as well. They're of equal importance. A student on a performance program still has to achieve their academic requirements and attainments. So I think we have to support them on that entire journey. It's very important. And we are different from the States, but they are experiencing, the States have a lot more resources, but we still provide the same level of support and nurturing of those athletes. So I think it is harder, obviously, when the resources are withdrawn. And when you reference the US model there, they're at a different level in terms of funding. But the support and the journey and the student life experience of those athletes is important in both jurisdictions.
I'm glad that I went to college in Ireland anyway, and happy to visit the US. You're on the opposite side, Catherine. Did you benefit from some of the student services in relation to your own sporting ambitions? I know Gráinne and Suzanne that would provide a really good service in UCD. Did you benefit from it yourself?
So in UCD, my degree has been funded as such, so I wouldn't have benefited from a scholarship scheme. But so in UCD, just to give our own statistic, the Ad Astra, which is the high performance Ad Astra Sports Scholars program, that's holding steady at approximately 60 athletes benefiting. So very, very pleased to report that. But it's probably obvious by now that I am from the United States originally, and I did my undergraduate degree in the United States. And I was in a situation when I was 18 where I had to choose between sport and academics, because I was a triple jumper in school, the triple jump and the hurdles, but I earned an academic scholarship at the university level. And the choice was, you can either do varsity sport or you can benefit from this academic scholarship. And that's a choice that I never would have had to make had I been an undergraduate in Ireland. And, you know, in the time since then, there is really, in the United States, you cannot do athletics unless you do it at an elite level. And so unless you're competing in a varsity context, my journey with it was over. And in that time, you know, I found cycling, which is a sport that I adore, and have become tremendously involved with at the university level. But it's very special to me in UCD to have that available to me, because it was expressly not available to me as an undergraduate in the United States. And so I cannot echo strongly enough the sentiment that the adaptation of rigorous academic study to accommodate elite sport training is something that is really precious in third level education in Ireland. And the fact that it's continued it's fantastic, but at the very least it's just, because the university that I attended as an undergraduate has completely eliminated 7 of their varsity sports, to include men's and women's swimming, and 2 of the athletics teams. And so these are students who, some of them had to make the decision that I made, and they chose the opposite way. They chose to participate in their sport, and now some of their ambitions have been dashed. And so as I said, I cannot emphasize strongly enough the I guess gratitude that I have, that there's been continuity in the provision of services for elite athletes. I realize before, you know, saying that there's been a lot done for elite athletes in comparison to recreational, but at the same time, elite athletes make a tremendous number of sacrifices, and the support of their journey academically as well is special in Ireland, and it's essential to continue.
Right, we'll take a positive from that. Go Ireland. In all its shapes and forms. I want to just go to a couple of the questions that are coming in. Christine O'Donovan is asking, are the third level institutions allowing indoor club activity in line with national governing body guidelines? Or in terms of the facilities that you're making available, the gyms, the swimming pools, the indoor courts, what's the situation north and south in that at the moment? Michelle first, maybe.
Hi, Christina. How are you? Yes, we are following the guidelines, and as of yesterday, no indoor club activities will be taking place. We had exemptions for teams competing prior to this. We had exemptions for teams competing in the national leagues, our volleyball, basketball, etc. But the NGBs have just announced that they're to suspend training indoors and matches, obviously. So we're at the moment today, we are not going to be having any indoor club trainings, but we do have our individual access to the gym, the high performance gym, and the general fitness gym, and also our pool is shut at the moment, but it will be open within the next 2 weeks, hopefully. If we're still in level 3, all of those areas will be available to all our students and the college community, and they have to now, under the restrictions, book into those spaces. So we know exactly who's coming in, and we have a number of protocols in place indoors to allow for that. We are also, in terms of group fitness, we're streaming and putting a lot of online fitness we have been doing that throughout the summer, but we're moving to a new professional platform next week, where all of those group fitness training sessions will be available online. And we do have online support for our performance athletes as well through another platform that we're monitoring and the coaches are using as well. So there are some support still continuing in an indoor capacity, but it's all individuals. There's no group sessions at the moment.
Okay, and is it similar up in Ulster, Nigel?
Yeah, absolutely similar. There just a couple of issues, obviously, as we're working through the guidelines, where maybe the provincial governing body has slightly different interpretation to the national governing body. So we had a couple of issues of that last night, and we're just working those through. But in general, no, there's no access to the indoor halls, no student club activity indoor, but very much we are looking, and again, it's slightly different across each of our campuses, to say, well, can we use the indoor space to extend the gym offering, you know, the opportunity of moving some equipment, which actually, because there is a demand to come into the gyms, and more so seeing people walk by my window here this morning, to say, well, can we move into certain areas in the sports centre? Some of those are actually areas that are normally teaching rooms for physio and practical. So we've been able to get some of those rooms, and we're allocating some of the additional equipment out to those. So there's just more space for people to do different activities. But yeah, very much the same picture as Michelle outlined in many ways. Okay.
John O'Carroll asked a question as well, which you addressed in the Q&A button, Nigel, but just for the benefit of the room, asking really about what the level of occupancy has been like over the first few weeks of the term. Are we operating at 25% capacity and demand 50%, 125%? What is it like at the moment?
From our point of view, again, differential across each of the campuses. What we think have been the guiding principle is the number of students who've decided to take and to come to university accommodation, and that's been different across the different campuses. Coleraine, for instance, I think 80% of students decided to come on to campus to start the studies. As a consequence, we've seen quite a lot of them taking up membership of the gym and using that. So that's been pretty good, and it's been just slightly different across the other campuses. As I put in the note, really, I think what was really interesting around some of the sports, football, soccer to a degree, hockey definitely has been a huge engagement, really. And I think it's people just getting out of lockdown and wanting to play, want to engage. You know, it's great, it's online, but there's nothing like, and that's why I continue to come into the office, not every day, but just that engagement that is so important to us in sport, to be able to have that conversation or a chat or a coffee. I think that's what we're finding in student sport. Even though a lot of students are not on campus, they're traveling in to come training in the evenings just for that sense of belonging and that sense of actually some activity. So I think that's going to be pretty difficult to deal with in the next 4 weeks.
Okay. And how has it been in Trinity? I know walking past in the city centre, I do still see the occasional body up on those the gym equipment that you've got there facing out onto Pearse Street. Demand down as well.
Well, we've obviously reduced capacity because we've kept the levels below 50 in terms of the fitness theatre. And we created an online booking platform so we can see the numbers of people booking in. So we've had high level of bookings, i.e. there are 40 plus on a lot of the slots that we've made available. And we've noted about a 25% no-show, which we're tackling at the moment. So, you know, it's not unusual that people would book in somewhere and then don't decide on the morning or the hour before that they don't want to go to the gym. And actually, this is one of the things that I think I'd like to note, that some of the staff working in these areas within sport have been absolutely incredible and so creative and flexible and innovative in the way that we've adapted all of our programs and our schedules. So I think a shout out to all of the staff working in third level sport. They've been so creative, and we have developed some carrots, I guess, to encourage the students to keep their bookings and to encourage them to come along. And only this week we were talking amongst our team about a buddy system, you know, and because it's individual training and all the language around it is individual, it's, you know, trying to, if you think about it yourself, when you were a student, you wanted to go to gym or training with somebody or to meet somebody. So we're trying to create an environment where they can go to the gym with somebody safely. You know, they don't have to train right beside them, but they can see them, they can say hello to them, they can work on similar programs and things like that. So I think a lot of our staff are trying to, you know, find ways to engage our students and create that social interaction that they absolutely are craving for. So yeah, I'm hoping that no-show percentage will go down in the next few weeks as our staff and our students engage more with some of those initiatives and programs to get people involved. I think it's important that we encourage all our students, no matter what level of fitness or what level of performance they're at, that they're doing something. I think that's the key to it, really.
Absolutely. You and the entire hospitality sector as well, wrestling with the idea of no shows. Let us all commit to that if we commit to something, that we turn up, because somebody else will have had to do some work in order to actually get it there. I'm delighted that everybody has turned up for this morning's session. We are going to have the opportunity to actually sort of meet almost in the same way as it would be in the real world. After we've concluded now in the next few minutes, that I'm going to send out a link in a few minutes. I'll grab a cup of coffee myself and we'll send out a link to a meeting room where we can all actually have a chat. If there's 2 of us there, sure, we'll have a quick chat. If there's 20 of us there, we might be able to split up into different rooms and groups and things like that. The wonders of technology. We'll see if it works anyway. So watch out. I'll send you an email if you have been here, and you'll get that. And it will be great if some of you can join us. Carmel Lynch is just echoing the your comments there, both Michelle and Nigel, about the staff and the organizational capacity, both within colleges and within the NGBs, saying that the communication and the engagement has been a huge positive, sharing of best practice, information on a daily and weekly basis. And congratulations to the 3 of you in terms of representing the third sector and indeed the entire student population of Ireland. Catherine, well done, in such good fashion this morning. Still room for another 1 or 2 questions if you want to ask. I want to raise one point. My daughter is playing Gaelic football in St. Pat's and DCU, and she was just about to get onto a bus heading down to Tralee for the finals, for the big finals in ladies Gaelic football back in March. A number of other sports will have been the same, that they will have been coming towards the conclusion of their 1920 season. Is there a general sense of what's going to happen with those, or have we just had to put those into a box and say, you know, DNF, DNQ, whatever, that last season's competitions won't take part, or is that a matter for the sporting bodies as well? I'll throw that out there as an open question. Nigel, I'll throw it to you first. Any senses to last year's competitions, whether they will be played out, or is it just one that we have to write down to history?
Robert, I think it's a very difficult question to work through, and clearly, the governance structures, be that in Student Sport Ireland, be that in terms of the representative sport governing bodies for student sport or sport, they'll have to determine that. But I don't know. I just think it's difficult to project where we're going. This 4 weeks. What comes after that? What does that mean as we get close to Christmas? Is this the new norm for a short while? Of close downs, breaking up. It's really hard to just project where we're going and what consequence that's really going to have for playing a competition. I know my son's mortified. Last night he's been training for weeks to play in the interprovincials in hockey under 16s, and they found out last night they can't. And they're just so disappointed. Obviously, we're trying to use the word postponed rather than cancelled, but there isn't really much clarity in terms of that. There's not going to be much clarity in terms of what will happen. So I don't know. I just think we can live in hope. Me, and I think Michelle comes from the same universe as me, really being positive, and I think Catherine does. First I've met Catherine, but it's really hard to pinpoint and to answer some of these questions just yet.
Indeed. And DJ Collins has just put into the chat there that unfortunately you were the one who made that call on the O'Connor Cup weekend. Well, I can assure you that nobody holds it against you personally. And in hindsight, the idea of jumping onto a bus with a load of fellow players would not have been a great idea at the time anyway. So well done on being brave enough to make the call. If you do have any insight as to whether some of those competitions are going to be coming on, then that's great. Dave McHugh is putting in there as well, imagining that in most cases that last year's competitions will be null and void, as was the case in 2001 when we had the foot and mouth outbreak. I studied history and politics in UCD, and I am a great believer that history is a great guide to the present and the future. So yes, looking back on foot and mouth, if that's what happened then, that is most likely the precedent. And fortunately, my daughter, at least anyway, is only going into second year, so she'll have other opportunities. If you were in your final year, well, you can always imagine that you would have won it anyway, I guess. We're at 10:56, and I know in this, as you said, Nigel, the new norm that everybody has busy online lives, and it tends to go on the clock that when it rolls around 00, that some will have other meetings to go to and other things to attend to. So we're going to call it now. It has been a really enlightening session at a time when enlightenment is in very short supply. We are not the masters and mistresses of our own destiny at the moment. We're in the hands of a virus that has proven to be a cunning and a pretty difficult opponent to face. But you know, in the world of sport, we are resilient. We know that we can't win every game. We know that we have to bounce back and keep on going and trying to win. So that's exactly what we will continue to do. It's a huge boost to morale, I think, that we've seen and heard such positivity from all three of you today. And it is that kind of attitude that is going to get us through this. So thank you to Nigel, to Michelle, and to Catherine. Thank you all for joining us and for making your contributions and listening in as well. We'll have highlights of this session together with the result of that survey up on the Sport for Business website a little bit later. I'm going to go away now and set up the invitation to go out for anybody who wants to come and join us for 30 minutes of virtual coffee and chat afterwards. No obligation, obviously, but it would be great to see some of you and open up the chat as well. But for the moment anyway, we'll sign off from here. Thank you very much to all.